This is a quick video explaining short assignment number 4. In short assignments 1 to 3, we explored the steps of creating a quantitative cross-sectional survey or experimental study. My hope is that even if you decide not to become a scientist or professor, these tools can help you become more marketable and data-driven in whatever future career you decide. We're going to take a bit of a detour from the direction of these past short assignments, however, and head into the domain of qualitative research. Here, you're going to practice a different set of skills in research methods, one that involves a more humanistic approach rather than strictly a numerical one. In this short assignment, I'm going to ask you to undertake a semi-structured interview. Chapters 15 and 16 in our text cover interviewing to a large extent, so please read these materials before engaging in this project. The goal here is to evaluate your skills on the qualitative side of communication research. The broad objective of this final short assignment is I want to know whether you leave this class knowing how to conduct a small-scale semi-structured interview. This assignment requires you to talk to someone in depth and document their lived experiences on a specific topic. I'll be evaluating you on how well you structure your interview guide, or the list of topics and questions you hope to ask your interviewee, your field notes, and your ability to interpret these field notes into descriptive themes. In this short assignment, I want you to take away 4 different ideas on which I will be grading this assignment. First, I want you to be able to understand and explain the steps of semi-structured interviews and go into the field and get some actual interview experience. Second, I want you to demonstrate that you can create an interview guide for a semi-structured interview. Third, I want you to be able to take organized notes so you can then analyze these data to make sense of the interviewee's experiences. And finally, I want you to be able to analyze these data into descriptive themes. So let's take some time to revisit some of the major differences between quantitative and qualitative research. Remember that in our previous modules, we focused almost exclusively on quantitative research to date. Quantitative research is based on the collection and analysis of numerical data. We explored different quantitative research methods such as cross-sectional surveys, longitudinal surveys, and quasi and true experiments. One thing you already know about quantitative research is that it's numbers-based. Everything we do in quantitative research has to do with enumerating human behaviors or observations into numbers. For example, if you're asking someone whether they smoke cigarettes on a fixed yes-no response choice scale, we would assign a 0 for no and a 1 for yes. The point of quantitative research is that we're trying to make inferences about relationships in the population by sampling from that population. We do this in a series of steps that minimizes the bias of the researcher in the research process. In qualitative research, we're much more focused on descriptive data expressed through language rather than numbers. It's well positioned to ask why and how questions. Because the researcher collects and makes sense of the words and labels used to describe certain phenomena, trait, or characteristic, the researcher is an important research tool in the research process. Therefore, there's no objective, generalizable truth sought through qualitative research. Instead, we seek subjective experiences made sense through the interpretation of the researcher. The first step in this exercise is a thinking and planning one. To give you some direction and not have to have you go on a wild goose chase, I'm giving you the research question to pursue. In this study, the overarching research question I want you to try and answer through your interview is, how does one's sense of happiness change over the lifespan? We know that from past research, different stimuli make people different happy at different points in their lives. So I'd like you to probe this idea in greater depth. Because we're asking about happiness over the lifespan, you're going to need to be selective about your interviewee, someone who can speak to experiences over a considerable length of time. That person could be a grandmother or grandfather, an uncle or aunt, a parent, or some other friend or family member. The next step is to create an interview guide that will help to initiate conversation between you and the interviewee. The interview guide is a list of topics or open-ended questions that the interviewer hopes to cover during the course of an interview. It's referred to as an interview guide because it is there to give the interviewer some guidance and structure, but it's not meant to be set in stone. In other words, you may get through all of the questions in your interview guide, but you may also not. And the questions are merely meant as a starting off point because this is a semi-structured interview. You may want to follow up with other open-ended questions based on something the interviewee said during the interview, which you think will help to enrich the data. The third step is to actually conduct the interview with your interviewee. Remember to follow the guidelines for effective interview protocol outlined in chapters 15 and 16 of your text. During the interview, you'll want to strike a careful balance of listening intently and responding thoughtfully to the interviewee, but also at the same time taking quality notes. Most interviewers do this by recording the conversation. If you decide to go down this path, please remember that it's ethically responsible to get permission from the interviewee, even if the recording is going to be used for your personal education information. Here are a couple of important things to keep in mind while taking your interview notes. First, remember that your notes aren't meant to be literary masterpieces. They're merely there to keep a log of what your interviewee says and how they react. So short phrases rather than full sentences or paragraphs are expected. Second, the interview notes should contain information about what is spoken, but it's also important to take note of the verbal messages and how they're being communicated. Notes on nonverbal communication, such as tone, cadence, volume, hand gestures, and facial expressions will be very helpful to you. The final step is to look for consistencies and themes across your transcript and interview notes. In typical qualitative studies, the researcher will have pages and pages of transcription and interview notes across several different interviews. Here, you may have pages of notes, but only on one interviewee. Your goal in this final step is to search for themes that help to answer our research question. A theme is merely consistencies or patterns in meaning found across the data. In thematic analysis research, it's a much more involved process of creating codes in a codebook, revising codes and themes, and scrapping themes when they don't fit into the narrative. But you're going to get an abbreviated version of this idea here. In our example, we might find codes that hang together, like here, here, and here, and come up with a theme that relational happiness that comes from love matures and grows as the person does. This could be a real theme you write down and the passages that help with the transcription that support it. That's pretty much it for this short assignment. This short assignment is one of the very first steps in you becoming a qualitative researcher. This is simply one more tool that you'll have in your toolbox when you leave this course, which, as I said before, may make you more marketable and research conscious. If you have any difficulties thinking about the interview guide, or you're not quite sure if your notes are put together correctly, please don't hesitate to reach out to me for help. As always, I hope you have a great experience with this assignment, and I hope you find it worth your time. Take care.